So today you came here, I guess, to listen to what I have to say about the Palestinians and Israel and the peace process and maybe the occupation of the West Bank. But before I start talking about the chances of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians, I would like to start and discuss the Palestinian side in general. No, this is what I do. This is what I do for my living. I mean, last 16 and a half years, I've been traveling a lot to the West Bank. Also, I used to go to Gaza Strip, not anymore. East Jerusalem, of course. Trying to get to understand better the Palestinian side and to bring to the Israeli readers and also to the English readers kind of perspective, a different perspective of an Israeli journalist that is traveling in the West Bank and Gaza Strip and is seeing the Palestinian society from the inside. I have also a TV show that became very successful in Israel for some miraculous reason, which is called Walla, which also dealt a lot with the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This is a kind of fiction, drama TV show, but that's maybe we'll leave it for the questions. I'll start with a kind of an opening of 30 minutes, and then I'll pass it to you to some questions and answers, because I really wanted to become a dialogue and not a boring monologue. But let me start by saying that when we talk about the Palestinian side, when we talk about the Palestinian society, we cannot talk about one Palestinian entity or one Palestinian side. There's the Gaza Strip. There's the West Bank. There's what we call Hamastan, which is Gaza under the control of Hamas. And we have the West Bank under the control of the Palestinian Authority with the Israeli occupation, the Israeli army. But it's a kind of two entities that are competing with each other, against each other, of who would become more popular and who would be capable of controlling better the other side. And that was about the elections, the local elections that were about to take place on October 8th, but then a couple of weeks ago, then the higher court in Ramallah decided to cancel the local elections. In generally speaking, when I look at Gaza, then again, till 2007, I used to go, travel, meet over there people. I have a great picture with Ismail Haniyeh, the probably future to come head of Hamas, and meet people over there. They dress differently, they talk differently than the ones that are living in the West Bank. It's not the same dialect. They even dress in a kind of different way comparing to Palestinians in the West Bank. You know, one of the most popular dress in Gaza for men is called dashtashit. What is dashtashit? It's kind of a very long dress. While in the West Bank, you know, people are dressed up more in a Western way. And over there in Gaza, I must say that, you know, you might find it surprising, but I estimate that if there would be elections tomorrow morning in Gaza Strip, Hamas would lose. Fatah would win. On the other hand, if there would be elections in the West Bank, Hamas would win. Why? Because the Palestinians from time to time behave like a good Jewish population, that always the grass on the other side is much greener. And this is the case of Gaza, and this is the case of the West Bank. And one of the greatest jokes that I witnessed, you know, this is one of the most brilliant moves that I watched by Hamas, that was made by Hamas in the last few years. When Hamas started a campaign for the local elections, it started a kind of a campaign on Twitter which was called Gaza Ajmal. In Arabic, what is Gaza Ajmal? Gaza is prettier. Meaning that Gaza is prettier under Hamas. So what they did is that they went to the beaches of Hamas, of Gaza, they went to the restaurants, they went to the nice places of Gaza. They took photos of it and they published it on Twitter, calling Gaza prettier under Hamas. And the man or the woman in the West Bank that were watching this campaign on Twitter looked at this beautiful, pretty pictures and were thinking to themselves, wow, Gaza is so nice and great. Maybe we should become like Gaza. Now, for just a few weeks, while they were campaigning for the local elections, Gaza suddenly is not under siege. Gaza is not poor. There's no unemployment. There's no poverty. But suddenly, Gaza is prettier. Now, this is Hamas. And the minute that the campaign ended, and the minute that there's no elections anymore, so then again, we have flotillas coming in order to save the poor Gaza. Just now, they went out of Barcelona, Spain, in order to save the Gazans. Now, the bottom line is about Gaza is that the conditions over there are pretty poor. And I'm not trying to make fun of the people that are living in Gaza, not at all. I have very good friends that are still living over there. But I must say that Hamas is using the local population. Hamas is a kind of a brutal dictatorship, brutal dictator that is doing whatever it feels like against their own people, and they're using their own people in order to manipulate the international community, in order to manipulate their own people in the West Bank, and to win in this kind of a campaign, the media campaign against the state of Israel. Now Gaza, in a way, it's a kind of tragic place. Why? Because in the years of 2002, well, all the years of the second Intifada from 2000 to 2007, the situation was pretty bad over there, but there were two gangs, I would say, that were competing over Gaza. One was Fatah, the other one was Hamas. But in 2007 it ended. And Hamas took over in a very brutal coup, killing 160 members of Fatah and taking over. And for years, what they did, they started a kind of an industry. And this industry was about the tunnels. And they were digging more and more tunnels all over the border between Gaza and Sinai. Now, I'm not talking about a tunnel or two. I'm not talking about 20 or 30 or even 100. I'm talking about 650 tunnels that allowed Hamas to flourish, that allowed Hamas to get more and more income, dollars. They used the tunnels, 650 tunnels, that were working 24/7 in order to have $240 million a month income just of taxes from these tunnels. Now, people might say, what do you mean by taxes over tunnels? I mean that they smuggled everything, including everything, into Gaza Strip from Sinai, with the help of the Bedouins that are living in Sinai Peninsula, Egyptian Bedouins, that helped them to smuggle everything into Gaza Strip. Now we're talking about cars, we're talking about motorbikes, we're talking about, of course, weaponry, guns, rockets, everything that you can imagine. They wanted to have in Gaza Zoo a lion, so they smuggled the baby lion. They couldn't find a zebra, so they smuggled a donkey. Well, they had a donkey and they just painted it in black and white. It's a true story. It's a sad story, but it's a true story. Well, when people in Gaza wanted to have KFC, fried chicken, for example, they used to call. It's what?
Louder, please.
When people in Gaza wanted to have KFC, it's important, Kentucky Fried Chicken, they used to call the KFC shop in El Arish, in the Egyptian side, which is very close to the border. And in 2 hours, they would get a KFC in Gaza. So it was a kind of a free flow tunnel. You know, I had a source, I would say. Guy from Ramallah, Najib, is an ex-wanted terrorist, but he was given amnesty after years of fighting against the Israeli army. But at the end, he was given amnesty. And one day I visited in his home in Ramallah, in a refugee camp called El Amari. And I was sitting with him and talking about his life, and he said, I want to go and visit my relatives in Gaza. And I told him, listen, Najib, you cannot go and cross Israel. They won't let you. You're an ex-wanted terrorist. He said, no, but I am allowed to go to Jordan, to go to Amman, and from there to take a plane to Al Arish, and I'll cross the border. I said, listen, dude, what, are you planning to cross the tunnels? He said, yes. I said, Najib, you're not a young man anymore. Are you planning to crawl like that in the dusk, in the dark? What? I said, no. There's a special taxi line that is taking you from one side to the other. So these were the tunnels. And then again, it allowed Hamas to get almost $250 million a month in income from these tunnels. And then it stopped. 2013, it stopped completely. Why? Because of the second revolution in Egypt, because of the new president, Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who decided to finish and to end this phenomenon of the tunnels. And al-Sisi went on a war against the tunnels industry. And one by one, well, it's not ended completely, but it's 95% of the tunnels do not exist anymore. You have a few that are still operating. And Hamas, in a few months, lost a major source of income. So today, when I look at the situation in Gaza, people have less money. Hamas has less money. But it's still the same situation, Morris. And by the way, this was one of the major reasons for the war of 2014, that Hamas lost its income. So now the siege is from the Egyptians. And I know that many people are saying, listen, there's an Israeli closure, a siege over Gaza. I don't buy it. I offer to these people, go and visit Kerem Shalom checkpoint, where you would see almost 1,000 trucks that are passing every day from the Israeli side into Gaza, giving supply, giving goods, while the Egyptian side is not letting Hamas to breathe. Even when Ismail Haniyeh, the future leader of Hamas, that wanted to go and make the Hajj, the ceremony where he's going and visiting Mecca and Medina, had to get a special approval from the Egyptian authorities, but all the other leaders of Hamas, they didn't get it. So we don't hear Hamas blaming Egypt for this closure or a siege, but they do blame the state of Israel. Now there's a very unique situation here between Hamas and the state of Israel. Hamas, for its reasons, is keeping things very quiet in the last few years. So the same jihadi organization that is calling for the elimination of the state of Israel is now keeping things very quiet. And it's not only keeping things very quiet, it's arresting members of other organizations that are planning to shoot rockets on the Israeli side. Now, is this the same Hamas that had sworn to the elimination of the state of Israel? Is this the same Hamas that is swearing every day that it would kill the last Jew, well, not Jew, but the Israelis and Zionists are living on earth? Well, yes. Hamas had learned a very tough lesson at the war of 2014. And this is what I call deterrence. And at the end, Hamas is now very careful about whether to shoot and not to shoot, or not to shoot the Israelis. And there's a kind of a very special debate, very Middle Eastern debate between Hamas and the government of Israel. The government of Israel, in a way, is not interested in the fall of Hamas. And this is why it's still mediating or negotiating it in, then again, Middle Eastern ways. What do I mean about Middle Eastern ways? Well, if some terrorist organization is launching a rocket towards Israel, Hamas usually goes and arrests them. If Hamas will not go and arrest them, then the Israelis will probably send some drones, looking very carefully above Hamas's compound, making sure that there are no people over there, and then shooting some rockets. Now Israel would say, we retaliated. Hamas would say, we have no casualties, and life can continue as they are. No wars, no explosions, just a kind of a status quo. When two entities understand that in a way they need to keep things as they are. And yes, the government of Israel is right now interested in having Hamas's regime, Hamas's government in Gaza. Why? Not because we like Hamas, not because suddenly they became true Zionists and they're not going to come and visit the JCC soon, but because we understand that the alternative is even more dangerous. And this is the reality of the Middle East. It's not that the alternative for Hamas in Gaza is going to be necessarily the PA, Palestinian Authority, but it might be other chaos or ISIS. And yes, there are some elements of ISIS that do operate today in Gaza. Now the positive or the more good news that are coming from the southern region is our relations with Egypt. And over there I must say a few words about it. It became our best partner for fighting against radicals and terrorists in the Middle East. This kind of a cooperation didn't exist in the past. We as journalists are not allowed to publish reports about this cooperation. It's a very secret cooperation, military one, security one, but still Palestinians, Egyptians, they know about this cooperation. There were many attacks that were made on Sinai territory, on Egyptian territory, as was reported in Bloomberg News Agency, that were made by the Israeli Air Force. And then again, we couldn't publish it, Bloomberg could. But we in Israel were not allowed to publish these things. But just imagine to yourself, if I was standing here in front of you a few years ago, and saying that the Israeli army would go and bomb targets on Egyptian territory with the approval of the Egyptian government, you would think that, I took the wrong pill that day. But this is the case of the New Middle East. And today we find the Egyptian in a much more radical and harsh position towards the Hamas than even the state of Israel. This is about Gaza. Let us do kind of a jump into the West. And over there, I must say, it's not a secret, but there's an Israeli occupation in the West Bank. But it's occupation deluxe. It's not that bad. I mean, I travel a lot to Ramallah, to Bethlehem, to Jenin, Hebron, everywhere. I must tell you, things are not that catastrophic in the West Bank. Nice restaurants, nice coffee shops, businesses, real estate businesses, huge economic cooperation between Israel and the Palestinians, between private companies and private companies, huge security coordination between the sides. And I know that you've been hearing a lot about Netanyahu blaming Abbas, and Abbas blaming Netanyahu. And on the ground, I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, security coordination is the best ever between the Palestinian Authority and the State of Israel. So although you hear Abbas, and I get to meet Mahmoud Abbas from time to time, he's a very nice man, I must say. And he's blaming Netanyahu for everything. And I know that Netanyahu is blaming Abbas for everything. But at the end of the day, the reality is much stronger than the leaders and the politicians. And the reality demands both leaders and both, at the end of the day, the security apparatus to join power and to work together against whom? Against Hamas. Yes, even the Palestinian Authority today understands that the real enemy, the most immediate one for the Palestinian Authority is Hamas. It's not the State of Israel. They learned the lesson in 2007. They still bear in the memories the throwing of people off the 15th floor of buildings in Gaza. They still remember the lynch that Hamas did in some of their friends and members of Fatah. I had people, sources, that I saw on YouTube the way that they were lynched. People that were in contact with me. People that I met in Gaza. Suddenly you see them in 2007 lynched by Hamas. And this is why the Palestinian Authority today is joining forces with Israel, with the Shin Bet, with the IDF, fighting against the Islamic Jihad and Hamas. Now, you would say, but there's incitement. You would say, but there are some terrorist attacks like the lone wolves, and Abbas is not going and condemning them, etc., etc. You're right about that. But this is a completely different story. They're fighting Hamas, then again, not because they're true pro-Zionist and pro-Israel, but because they understand that Hamas is a threat for them, for the Palestinians. Now this is the situation on the ground. Security coordination, economic coordination, but no political rights. No peace negotiations, no peace agreement out there, and the two leaders are not talking. And I think that this is bringing more despair and lack of hope. And when young people in the West Bank are looking at the leadership, they look at Abbas and they think this is a collaborator with the State of Israel. Why? Then again, because he's coordinating things with the Israeli Shin Bet. He's helping the Israeli army to do this or to do that. Sometimes it's really making me wonder. I was present in a kind of a party, a goodbye party that was organized by Palestinian officials to their Israeli colleague, a colonel, that ended his job as the commander of Qalqilia area. So they did a huge party in Salfit city to say goodbye from this Israeli commander. Now, can you imagine that? And then again, although the rivalry and blah, 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 officers from both sides are celebrating and doing some parties together in order to say goodbye from someone. I'll tell you more than that. Last week, two women soldiers, got by mistake into Tulkarem. The Palestinian Authority saved them. I'll tell you more than that. 2 years ago, outside of Ramallah, while I was covering a demonstration, I was attacked by a mob who tried to lynch me. I was hit, and then in a few seconds, I was caught by two people, two men, that I didn't recognize, I didn't know who they were. And they saved me from the hands of the mob. And they were security people, Palestinian security intelligence. That saved my life, actually. And you know, when I went back home, my daughter was then 8 years old. And it was in the news. And I knew that at some point, some parents of kids in her school, in her class, would hear about it and tell her. So I decided to talk with her about that and to tell her the story. And I told her, listen, some people tried to hit me. And she said, who were these people? And I said, Palestinians. And she asked, okay, what happened? And I said, I was saved. Who saved you, Dad? I said, Palestinians. Now, she couldn't really understand what's going on. Like, Palestinians are trying to hit her father, but at the same time, the Palestinians are saving her father. And I think that this is one of the lessons that I was trying to teach my daughter. Meaning that there's good and bad everywhere. There are bad people, there are good people. And even among the Palestinians, yes, there are very good people. Now about the new generation on the Palestinian side, I must say that I'm very pessimistic. Because at the end of the day, most of the young Palestinians do not know Israelis, do not care about Israelis. They don't know Hebrew, they don't work in Israel. What they get is from Facebook or social networks or Al Jazeera. And for them, the Israelis are the big enemy, the Satan. And when you go there to the West Bank and you talk to them, it's kind of surprising for them to even talk to an Israeli. And then I go to ask them, what are you thinking about the Palestinian Authority? They hate the Palestinian Authority. They hate Mahmoud Abbas, they hate Fatah. It's not that they admire Hamas, not at all. They are very lost. This is my feeling. They are very disappointed from Fatah, but also disappointed from Hamas. They understand that both do not really work. And then I ask them, okay, so what do you want? Do you want a two-state solution? In Jenin refugee camp, in Balata refugee camp, you know, the heart of the second Intifada, where most of the suicide attackers went out from, Balata, Jenin, the Haitian refugee camps. When you talk to the young people and ask them, what do you want, two-state solution? Well, not so much. Why? Because we don't have a leadership. So what do you want? And then comes the answer, one state. One state. Let's wait. Let's wait 5 years, 10 years. At the end of the day, you, Israel, you'll have to give us the rights, the civil rights. We would be able to go to fly from Ben Gurion airport. We would be able to vote in the Knesset. And at the end of the day, we would change the state of Israel from inside. And I think that this is one of the major threats today that Israel needs to deal with. And that's the two-state solution is slowly, slowly fading away into the pages of the history. Is it still possible? I'm not that sure. I'm not that sure that right now as we speak, even if it would seem in some miraculous way, both leaders, Abbas and Netanyahu, kissing and hugging, signing a peace agreement. Does this mean that we will see a peace agreement being fulfilled on the ground the day after? The answer is no. So you're probably asking, okay, Avi, but why isn't it so? And my answer would be, well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One was what I started with, meaning that we have Gaza under the control of Hamas. And I can assure you, knowing Hamas, knowing the leaders, talking to the leaders, the minute that the negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians will become a bit more serious, they will do everything possible in order to stop, in order to prevent it, even by shooting rockets or sending suicide attackers, just like what they're trying to do right now. Right now, as we speak, still Hamas is trying to send its people to do attacks in the West Bank. And the other reason, yes, we need to say that it's the settlements. It's becoming a bigger and a bigger issue, a real obstacle for peace, and I think that it will be very complicated for any government in the future to evacuate settlements. Now, maybe they will remain as they are, maybe the territory would remain as it is, just like Netanyahu is hinting again and again. I don't know. But the problem is that, then again, a two-state solution is fading away. Now, one more word, and I'll pass it to you, about this young generation of the Palestinians. I've been traveling a lot in the West Bank in the last year, trying to follow the steps of people that made these lone wolves attacks. And I think that you see the copycats in Europe, the copycats in Minnesota, in Miami. It's not only about ISIS. I think that the lone wolves phenomenon started in the West Bank, yes. We are now just 1 year exactly, almost 1 year exactly. October 1st was the beginning of this Al-Quds Intifada, or the lone wolves Intifada. And what we had seen over there is that hundreds of young Palestinians were ready to give up their life in order to kill Israelis. Simple as that. And I was trying to understand what's going on. When I followed, when I reported about the second Intifada, yes, there were young Palestinians that were ready to give up their life with suicide attacks, with explosive deaths by killing dozens of Israelis. Here, you're dealing with 16, 17, sometimes 18, sometimes 13 years old boys and girls that are taking scissors or knives, and they know that they're about to get killed, and still they do that. So I was trying to figure out what's going on. What is their motivation? To kill Israelis? But it's more than that. And I think that the thing that got me was in a demonstration in November, 10 months ago, outside of Jerusalem in Al-Quds University. Al-Quds University is where Abu Dis is. I don't know if you know the village of Abu Dis, but not far from Jerusalem. 500 students, that's it. Throwing stones at nothing. Throwing Molotov cocktails on the fence, the security fence. And at some point I watched them and I saw that they were wearing t-shirts. T-shirts with a portrait of someone. And I got closer and I saw that there was a name over there, Muhannad Halabi. Muhannad Halabi was the killer of 3 Israelis on October 3rd in the old city of Jerusalem. For them, he was their hero. He was the superstar, Muhannad Halabi. The Shaheed, the martyr, the Batal, the champ. This is what they called him. You know, when I was sitting a few months ago in San Francisco, with Hannah here, in one of the bars in San Francisco, watching game number 2. And, you know, people were wearing t-shirts of their favorite player. They wanted to become like him. While these guys, instead of wanting to be LeBron, sorry for saying, or Giannis, well, they wanted to become like Muhammad Halabi. And I think that the problem begins over there. And yes, there is incitement. And I know that many people in Israel blame the social networks, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. You should close down, blah, blah, blah. No Facebook, our problems will be gone. This is not the case. There was terror, there was incitement way before the Facebook. People, Arabs, were killing Jews back in 1917, back in 1929, when there was no Facebook, no Twitter, not even Twitter. It might surprise some of the young people. But then again, there was incitement. And back then, the incitement was through the mosques. Then came the print. You know, when they did attacks at the late 80s or the early 90s, they spread around all kinds of, they called it bayan, a kind of a sheet paper, saying we took responsibility for this attack or the other. Then came the video cassettes, with someone saying, we kidnapped this soldier, Ashwan Waxman, in 1994. I was back then a young soldier. And then came the satellite networks like Al Jazeera, and at the end came the social networks. Now it's easier for the terrorists now to spread the word. It's easier to be affected by ISIS because of Facebook, because of Twitter, because of YouTube, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, the incitement was there way, way before the Facebook. And I think that we need to take care of the real problem and not to shoot the messenger. And this is the kind of a problem that still some people in Israel, I think, are missing here about this picture. So generally speaking, when I look at the West Bank, right now the situation over there is not that bad. They even have a nice sushi in Ramallah. They have pretty good restaurants over there. I like going over there, sitting in the coffee shops, enjoying the nice weather of Ramallah, or Bethlehem, or other places. But still, when you look ahead, when you look at the long-term solutions, I don't see hope. I don't see some kind of a solution that might change the equation here between the Palestinians and Israelis. Please. Yes.
Could you clarify the concept of occupation in the West Bank? I mean, is it essentially checkpoints, or do you have military vehicles and soldiers on the ground within the communities of Ramallah and the other communities?
The checkpoints are at the entrance to the Green Line, State of Israel. There are almost no checkpoints at all inside the West Bank. Meaning if someone from Jenin, which is up in the north, wants to go and visit his cousin in Hebron, there are no checkpoints. Unless something happens and then the idea of boom, puts a checkpoint. Yes. So there are incursions still. Like if the Israeli army has some info, some information, some indication that there's a Hamas guy, there's an Islamic Jihad guy, or there's a Fatah guy that is planning something, so they would go and arrest him. By the way, one more thing that I need to say about such social networks. It's a problem, we know, when people are being affected by this kind of an epidemic effect. That, you know, you're reading Facebook about this man, how big he is, and a hero that he is, and blah, blah, blah. But the social networks also allowed the Israeli intelligence and the Palestinian intelligence to follow the steps of these people and to understand who they are even before they go and commit some attacks. So it's not only bad for the state of Israel, those social networks. About your question, then again, so if there's any need for an operation, it's either that the IDF is sending forces, or, by the way, sending the intel to the Palestinian side, and they would go and arrest them.
But there is no physical occupation within the cities themselves, is there? Military vehicles, soldiers on the ground, no. And
inside the cities, no.
So why is it called occupation?
Please keep in mind that, you know, it's 60% of the Palestinians are living in the West Bank cities, but 60% of the territory is outside the cities. So it's only a small proportion of the West Bank. Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that the present government or any future government in Israel can ever dream of evacuating 300,000 settlers, most of them with the encouragement of government since 1967?
Just one thing that I need to, it's 400,000.
Oh, it's even more. I'm glad to know the new number.
The West Bank. Settlers in the West Bank.
Yeah, not including Israel.
Not including Jerusalem.
Not including.
Not including Jerusalem.
Not including. I think that this is one of the major issues here. That we as Israelis, we need to answer. And maybe most of the people in Israel today gave up the idea of a two-state solution. And maybe, I heard Danny Gordis was brilliant, if you ask me, but yes, maybe most of the people in Israel wouldn't like to continue and have this occupation, but they're afraid that we will have Hamas down in the West Bank. But at the end, what we're doing is not freezing the situation and, okay, let's see if we can solve it in the future. But we're doing kind of an internal damage, meaning we're doing a big X over the option of two-state solution by continuing and building more and more houses in the settlements. Now, I'm not saying that it's only about the settlements. It's much more than the settlements. We have Jerusalem, we have the right of return, we have blah, 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 so many issues. And every day that passes by makes us go far and far and far from the two-state solution. Though in 2008, when Ehud Olmert was negotiating with Mahmoud Abbas, and they got around the number of 93.6 of the West Bank territory that would be under the control of the Palestinian Authority, and the remains would be under Israeli settlement blocks or under Israeli sovereignty. It was already back then, 2008, 8 years ago, mission impossible. Why? Because when we talk about the unilateral withdrawal from Gaza, we had 10,000 people back then, 10,000 people, and it took the whole army in order to get them out. Here we're talking about around 120,000 people that we will need to evacuate. And this is why it makes many people in Israel wonder, okay, maybe we need to change our thoughts. Maybe we will need to keep the settlements in their place, as they are, but in some kind of agreements with the Palestinian Authority in the future.
Or exchange territory.
Yes. Like exchanging?
No, I'm not talking about settlement blocks. I'm talking about new kinds of arrangements that they will be still living in their houses, but as Palestinian citizens. For example, this is one of the ideas. It's not that the Palestinians like these ideas, but this is what got Benjamin Netanyahu in a kind of a ethnic cleansing speech, okay? This is what he was referring to, because maybe we would leave the settlers where they are under Palestinian sovereignty. What the Palestinians are demanding, no, evacuate all of them. At the end, it's a huge problem for each and every government that will be. And even for a future government that is not a right-wing government, it's a much bigger headache. Why? Because if there would be peace with Bibi, more people from the right wing would follow him. Yes?
What would you really consider a settlement? Would you consider a historically Jewish area like Hebron a settlement?
Look, when I talk about the settlements, it's not me defining it or not. I'm sorry to say that no one asks me. Or maybe I'm happy about that. But I think, yes, according to what is defined even by the Israeli Authority, Hebron is a settlement. The Jewish neighborhood. Yes?
Can you talk about the viability of the so-called Arab peace plan now that there are such better relations, or so-called better relations between Israel and Saudi and Egypt and Jordan? I mean, Israel is basically propping up Jordan. So I'm curious what your sense is if those countries actually care about the Palestinian situation and if there would be some progress as a result of these new relations.
It's a good question. I'm not convinced that they care. You hear the Egyptians from time to time saying, you should go and solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Okay? Let's continue. Just like that. You hear the Jordanians saying from time to time the Israelis are doing bad here, bad there. Okay, let's continue with our issues with Israel. I think that, part of the problem is that the Palestinians are feeling that they were neglected. They were neglected by the Arab world. Even Saudi Arabia is dealing with us, negotiating with us under the table, very secretly. The United Emirates, some countries in the Gulf, in the Arab, Persian Gulf. Suddenly the whole of the Middle East, I know that I need to talk today about Palestinians and Israelis, but what happens in the Middle East is a huge story. And it might take me another hour and they wouldn't let me talk for another hour. But the Middle East is not the same Middle East. It's not about the Israeli-Arab conflict anymore. It's about Shia versus Sunni. It's about Saudi Arabia versus Iran. Simple as that. And Israel, in a way, finds itself part of the Sunni pragmatic camp. When I was a young soldier in the Israeli army, I was training for the option for the potential war against Syria. For some kind of a war even against the Egyptian army. And that was not, kind of long time ago. Not too long, but kind of long time ago. Now it's completely changed. Now, which Syrian army exactly is going to try and occupy parts of the Golan Heights? It's a joke. There's no Syrian army that is capable of doing that. Egyptian army, then again, like I mentioned, Israelis and Egyptians are fighting shoulder to shoulder against ISIS in Sinai Peninsula. The Jordanians need our intel in order to stop ISIS from doing all kinds of actions or terrorist acts on Jordanian soil. And even the United Emirates is using some of Israeli technology, as you probably heard in the news, in order to fight internal issues. So they care a lot. They care a lot about the Palestinians, but before that, they care about themselves. Yes?
Do you see what could be the if it's too late for a two-state solution? Do you see any viable one-state solution? I mean, you talked about the young Palestinians. They think in time then they'll be able to take over. And Netanyahu has this idea somehow of just keeping them in their settlement blocks and they're going to stay peaceful somehow. Do you see any alternative to a two-state solution?
I'm afraid that until we will completely neglect the two-state solution, we will see more violence. I'm afraid that, the moving to the one-state solution is not going to be that easy. And before that, we're going to see different phases on the ground. There's a Palestinian Palestinian leader in Israeli jail called Marwan Barghouti. He was convicted in murdering of 5 people. And is probably the future to come Palestinian president. If there will be elections, he will be elected. And I heard so many people in Israel saying, well, because of the jail, Barghouti is popular. No, this is not the case. I know Barghouti since 2000. I got to know him personally. I'm the last journalist that got to meet him in Israeli jail. This man has real intentions. He's a leader. He's very popular in the West Bank and in Gaza. It never happens that someone from the West Bank is popular in Gaza, vice versa. This guy is. And he has a plan. And I published this plan something like 6 months ago. And his plan is to go on a kind of a popular resistance, but again, non-violence, what he calls non-violence. But for example, do something pretty simple. And he has this plan together with Hamas's officials. By the way, he sent his people to Qatar. They agreed upon this plan, meaning that when they will start their demonstrations or the 4th Intifada or whatever, the day after Abbas, they call it the day after. Everyone knows what does it mean the day after. It's not saying after Abbas, but everyone knows that it's after Abbas will be gone. He's saying, look, we'll go and sit at the entrances of settlements. Sit, not more than that. Blocking supply, blocking people from going out or in to the settlements. He's saying, let's walk. Let's march towards the Israeli checkpoint. And what will happen then when you will have around 2,000, 3,000 Palestinians that are just walking towards the Israeli checkpoint? It would be very difficult for the Israeli army to deal with that. Now, is that going to succeed? I'm not sure at all. Why? Because Marwan Barghouti is not thinking till the end about what will happen among his people. And we can say many things about the settlers of the state of Israel and the occupation and blah, 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 but at the end of the day, the Palestinian society is suffering from, yes, brutality sometimes, terrorism, etc. And I can assure you that when this demonstration will start, you would see some people with guns. And they will start shooting. And the Israeli army will shoot back. And no more popular resistance. Just like what happened in 2000. But I think, and this is what I believe, we will see more bloodshed. And I'm sorry to say that we will see much more bloodshed before the moving to the face of one state. Then there are all kinds of